Many studies throughout the years have shown us that our kitchen might be a major source of chemicals like PFAS, BPA, and of course, microplastics. And one of those studies released by the World Wildlife Foundation in 2019 found that on average, we are consuming up to 1 credit card's worth of plastic every single week.
That's so upsetting.
We've all seen the headlines of having plastic in our brains, PFAS-laden drinking water, and even finding lead in some baby food. Well, a lot of this can feel really out of our control and a little bit scary, but what we cook with, what we eat from, and what we consume seems to be showing our consumption habits might be poisoning us one bite at a time. That's why in this video, I'll be breaking down some of the most common toxic kitchen items and giving you some simple low-waste swaps to make your space a little bit healthier without having to throw away everything at the same time. Before I dive into all of the items that are potentially toxic and what the swaps are, I do want to talk about what some of the common contaminants we are exposed to every day might be. So one of the top ones is PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, more commonly known as forever chemicals. These are most often found in our nonstick cookware, our drinking water, stain-resistant textiles, and food packaging. Next, BPA and BPS. These are found in many plastic food containers and many canned food linings, as well as cans that we drink things like soda pop from. Next is phthalates. These are often found in plastics and other flexible materials. So think of the thin plastic linings, maybe inside of things like cup of noodles, or those plastic steam-in-the-bag vegetables that make dinner time a little bit easier. Next is microplastics. There's plastics everywhere. Plastic in our food packaging, our drinks, our cutting boards, our containers. I could go on for ages talking about where all the plastic can be found, but from plastic kitchen tools to sponges and packaging, microplastics might be one of the hardest for us to avoid. And finally, another one that, I'm sorry if this is a little bit scary, flame retardants and synthetic coatings. This is found in some kitchen textiles and appliances. It's a little less common now because of regulations, but of course, those regulations could always be changed. Now on to the kitchen swaps. First, we're going to talk about cookware. So non-toxic Teflon pans are the bane of my existence. The reason being is that Teflon is made from a group of chemicals called PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. These are also called forever chemicals because they don't break down in our bodies or in the environment. They effectively last forever. Every molecule of PFAS that has ever been created since the 40s, 50s, 60s, whenever they were invented, still exists to this day. The reason why we want to avoid eating and consuming and being exposed to PFAS on a regular basis is because they are linked to major health issues such as cancers, kidney and testicular cancer in particular, hormone disruption because they are an endocrine disruptor, and all of the toxins we're talking about today are endocrine disruptors which impact our hormones. They can also impact immune systems and maybe contribute to low birth weights and developmental delays in infants. So this may be especially important if you want to lower your children's exposure to chemicals and plastics. There is still some debate around if cooking with Teflon can directly cause cancer for the user. So I'm talking about like standing over the stove and cooking and then having those fumes emit up to the user. But it's something that I personally avoid because I don't really want to find out. Plus, at a high temperature, Teflon coatings do start to break down and they release toxic fumes that can cause a polymer fume fever, which is like more commonly referred to as Teflon flu. So with cookware, what I'm looking for in my daily life, or really anything that I buy nowadays is I want to make sure that the impact during production and the afterlife is not that great. And the thing about Teflon is that the manufacturing is one of the most notorious water and soil polluters on Earth and has contributed to a global pollution crisis. So even if it might not be making us sick in the moment when we're cooking, up for debate, but that is how it has entered up to 60% of the US public water system and why everyone in the United States should be using water filters. We do have 2 full breakdown videos, one that overviews some PFAS hotspots in public water systems and another one that overviews water filters that do effectively remove some types of PFAS so you can avoid consuming PFAS in that manner. All right, now for the good news. Safer, long-lasting, non-toxic cookware options do exist, and many of them are better for your health and the planet. First and foremost, she's down here. This weapon, if someone breaks into your house, is also a naturally non-stick cookware option. I prefer cast iron because it lasts a really long time. It can be passed down through generations if it is properly cared for and seasoned. And even I've seen some videos of people taking rusty, crusty cast irons and like rejuvenating them and bringing them back so they can be used again. They're durable, they heat really well, and they add a small amount of dietary iron. The next best option is stainless steel. It is non-reactive, great for broiling, boiling, and sautéing, and it's an easy to clean, non-toxic option. I also think that they sometimes might be more affordable than a cast iron, but I could be wrong about that, and it might depend on the brand that you buy with. And I have talked to some people who are like new to using stainless steel and they don't like cooking in it because they think that it's not really possible to be non-stick. But in that case, I think just learning how to heat it properly with oils and things could be something to try. This one I'm not so sold on. So ceramic coated cookware is often labeled as PFAS free. And if you do choose to buy ceramic coated cookware, you want to look for labels that explain the type of PFAS that it is free from. So it should say PFOS, PFOA, PTFE free, something along those lines where it identifies the type of PFAS that it does not contain. Because they have some type of coating is why I'm not 100% convinced that they are less toxic, but I want to mention them because they are often a little bit better than something like a Teflon coating. But if I had to choose, and I do in my own home, I just use stainless steel and cast iron. Another option while you are shopping is to always look for third-party certifications. So like I said, with identifying the type of PFAS that they might be eliminating, there are NSF certifications you can get for cookware, Made Safe certified, and Green Guard Gold. These are not perfect by any means, but they do require some type of third-party testing, which gives me a little bit of comfort when I am shopping. All right, next up is food storage. So plastic containers are a very common thing here in the US, and many of us use them to reheat items as well. But here's the thing, storing your food, and even worse, cooking your food in any type of plastic, especially if it's older, black plastic, scratched, cloudy plastic, that might have hidden health hazards. Not just because of microplastics, but because of other additives like BPA, BPS, and phthalates. These chemicals have the most potential to leach into your food when you're microwaving them, when you're storing hot or acidic foods like tomato sauces or vinegar-based dishes, or if the containers are especially worn down and old. And now, as we learn more about the health implications of microplastics and the amount of plastics that are in our life and the level of food processing that exists in the United States, it is something that we should definitely consider. And food processing is a whole other rabbit hole and maybe a discussion for another time. So let me know if that is a topic you would like a little bit deeper dive of. So what can we use instead? Luckily, there's tons of non-toxic alternatives that are reusable and better for your health and also your pantry aesthetic if you care about something like that. Something that I use on a regular basis is glass jars and containers. So something like a Pyrex will last you pretty much your whole life. Oftentimes, if I have a Pyrex, the only time I'm losing it is if I'm giving it to a friend or I misplace it somewhere in the depths of my Lazy Susan corner cabinet. I also prefer to use things like old pickle jars or sauce jars because where I live, you can't recycle glass anyway. So I'm going to be keeping them on hand so I can use them for other things. When I am using something like a pasta or pickle jar, these are also amazing for leftovers. Next option would be stainless steel containers. These are super durable, lightweight, and non-reactive. Bummer on that is you can't put it in the microwave, and please don't put it in the microwave. You can do that with glass, however. Other common options for storage that we should be avoiding are Ziploc bags and things like plastic wrap or saran wrap. And there's tons of great alternatives to this. You can use beeswax wrap instead of a plastic wrap or something like a silicone bag instead of a Ziploc bag. I also have some fabric bags that I use or paper bags if it's something that doesn't need to be airtight. Next up is kitchen utensils. What you're stirring with, what you're flipping, and what you're serving your food with can also have an impact. And kitchen utensils matter more than you might think when it comes to reducing your toxic exposure in your kitchen. Plastic spatulas and spoons, whisks, turners, really any utensil that you're using are super common, but they come with a set of risks, especially when they're exposed to high heats. Plastic utensils can obviously leach microplastics and some harmful chemicals like melamine, BPA, and flame retardants into your foods at high temperatures. Even BPA-free plastics often contain other types of bisphenols like BPS and BPF, which can be just as harmful, but we just don't necessarily have enough studies or scientific evidence to create regulations to remove them yet. And over time, these utensils degrade with heat and wear, and they release more microplastics and additives as you use them. I mean, think about how your plastic spatula might wear down in your pan or flake off in your food. Those are all opportunities. Those are all opportunities for us to be consuming larger quantities of plastic, which isn't necessarily something I prefer. Some safer alternatives exist. There are silicone options. This is plastic, not silicone. There are some silicone options that are food-safe silicone. Not necessarily my preference, but definitely still safer than something like a black plastic. Stainless steel is always a go-to option. And then, of course, the handy-dandy, trusty wooden spoon. Not everyone loves wooden spoons because they're afraid of them harboring bacteria, but many of them are naturally antimicrobial. They are a more renewable option and compostable. Plus, they don't scratch ceramic pans. So if you have ceramic pans in your home, I would typically recommend something like a wooden spoon or a silicone spatula versus a metal spoon or spatula, just so you can prolong the life of your ceramic cookware. If you are worried about your wooden spoon harboring bacteria, look for untreated or food-grade finished wood that avoid varnishes or mystery coatings, because although it may have a base of wood or bamboo, the processing or coatings on it could have some type of chemical in it. I don't know what the chemicals could be, but mystery chemicals aren't good either, I think. Unfortunately, FDA standards in the US are not the most stringent for things like cookware. And so if you really want to go down a rabbit hole on non-toxic cookware items and utensils, you might want to be looking for some European standards like the LFGB certification, because that means that there should be no chemical fillers included at all. Cups and plates, cups and plates. What are you using for your cups and plates? Okay, So let's talk about another often overlooked item in the kitchen when it comes to microplastic and chemical exposure. What you're drinking out of and what you're eating off of. So disposable anything, this is going to be at the bottom of the barrel. That's going to have the most chemicals, the most exposure to toxins, especially something like a coffee cup when you're putting hot liquids inside of, or if you decide to microwave a plastic plate that has any type of liner on the outside, which is, I think, every not plastic plate, paper plate, disposable plate. Do they make disposable plastic plates? Let's just avoid disposable plates, people, okay? Then next tier above that in terms of like exposure to chemicals and microplastics would be plastic cups and plastic plates, especially if you put hot liquids in them or anything acidic. So my preference in my home is a glass cup, or maybe even the pasta jars and pickle jars that you saved once you have them cleaned out. Those can then be used as cups. One personal favorite from my childhood is, of course, the handled jelly and jam jars, because then you have a cute little handle and a cup. Even some reusable dishes that are marketed for kids or outdoor use, that they aren't completely safe because the paper plates will often contain coatings like PFAS to make them grease or water resistant. And then there's also those bamboo plates that you often see marketed for families and kids. Those will contain some type of binder like a melamine, and the bamboo itself, when it's processed really for anything from a wood pulp, it then uses chemicals in that processing process is not a great phrase, but uses some type of chemical in the processing. So glass plates and cups, they're durable, they're non-toxic, they are completely inert, and they won't leach anything into your foods or drinks. I do know if you're thrifting like some old glass cups and drinkware, sometimes the printing on the front of them will contain lead. So be aware that if you decide to thrift any items for your kitchen, that older items often contain lead, which is a big bummer. Okay, if you look for tempered glass for extra durability, brands like Duralex or even IKEA's tempered glass is a great budget option. And then for kids, I always love the brand Tabor Place. I always pronounce it wrong. But she helped out a little bit with this video because she's the anti-plastic lady on TikTok. And her sippy cups are made from glass and have a silicone protector on the outside, so if your child drops it, then it won't break. Ceramic dinnerware, why am I pointing at peanut butter? Ceramic dinnerware is another decently safe option, but I have similar feelings to it as I do with the cookware itself. So just be mindful as well with older pottery and handmade pottery, because like thrifting glassware, some older pottery can use lead-based glazes. So for those options, like for mugs and stuff, I tend to stick to maybe slightly more modern, food safe, certified ceramics. Next, you can also use enamel-coated metal plates and mugs. These are lightweight, non-toxic, and especially great for camping and kids. And of course, you can use things like stainless steel cups and plates. These maybe are less favorable in the home, at least the plates, because you can't microwave them easily. You can use some wooden plates as well, but like I mentioned with the bamboo, you have to be pretty careful about what materials and chemicals they contain. When it comes to any of this, especially like the everyday items like our drinkware, I often recommend that people just start with a few multi-purpose options like glassware, cups, bowls, using an old mason jar, a salsa jar, yogurt pots. What is a yogurt pot? A yogurt jar, those types of things, because they're reusable, you already have them, and then it's a little less overwhelming to invest in a whole new kitchen set. This one's really quick, strainers. I don't have an example of that right here, but you know what a pasta strainer looks like. Ah! Up next is a strainer. So plastic strainers can be a risk for things like microplastics and chemical leaching, especially because we often pour boiling hot water into them. To strain things like noodles and potatoes. And the easiest swap, in my opinion, is then, of course, a metal strainer. I know people don't love these, but you can get the metal strainers that have the silicone handles on the side to prevent them from getting a little too hot for your hands to handle. After strainers is sponges and dishcloths. So I am in the camp of having some paper towels on hand, and I think it's because I have dogs, and sometimes you just need paper towels, okay? But I don't use very many of them, and I don't go through them very fast. So we always have a bin of dish towels that can be used fairly regularly, and they are not microfiber. So that's something that I am mindful of when I'm buying any sort of cloth for the kitchen, when I'm wiping things down or drying dishes. I want them to be a natural-based fiber. Then, of course, what are you washing your dishes with? So sponges and dishcloths can be another source of chemical and plastic pollution, as well as those little pouches that you put in a dishwasher. So many of the dishwasher pods have a plastic coating on the outside. Once that heats up, distributes, and opens up the cleaning detergent inside, those then get plastered all over your cups and plates. So even if you have glass cups, glass anything in your kitchen for a container or your plates, then it's possible that you're getting a coating of that in your dishwasher. Also, most conventional dish sponges, back to those, like this little cutie patootie here, those yellow and green ones as well that have like the two layers, like the more aggressive scrubby and then the sponge on the bottom. These ones and those are often made from synthetic materials like polyurethane and nylon, which are all petroleum-based plastics. So not only do they harbor more bacteria, but they also shed microplastics onto your products and then down the drain every time you use them, which then down the line contributes to water pollution and harming aquatic ecosystems. Your dish soap can do the same thing, so that's worth swapping out for a more environmentally friendly alternative as well. So what are the alternatives? Natural loofahs are an amazing alternative because, well, that's a plant. And these plant-based scrubbies are fully biodegradable and compostable, and they're great for light scrubbing. They can even be sanitized in boiling water or in the dishwasher to extend their life. I most often see the plant, like the actual plant loofah, used in bathrooms versus for dishes, but they can be used as dishes. I just don't think they work quite as well. Then, of course, there's compostable scrubbers, so plant-based fiber scrubs that are in the same shape as the traditional sponge. They hold up well without leaching microplastics, and then also something like a wooden compostable bristled scrub brush can work quite well too. Then for tough messes, a stainless steel scrubber is a great option and often lasts a really long time. Plus, you can use them in your stainless steel pots and pans, right?
That's why we have them.
That's what I thought. Okie dokie. The next option is back to like dishcloths. So like the Swedish dishcloths, reusable cotton or linen dishcloths. These are a great zero waste option. They're soft, absorbent, washable, and long lasting. I personally like to keep a mix of different scrubbers for different tasks. So maybe you have a loofah and a metal scrubby for pots and pans, or a Swedish dishcloth for everyday wiping and drying. Find what works for you. And there's so many options on the market now, you should be able to find a non-plastic alternative quite easily. So cutting boards are kind of a hot topic in the anti-plastic zero waste space. And that's because they're so popular. Everyone has them. I even have one, but I don't know why I still have it, because it just sits there and I don't use it because I have wooden cutting boards now. But these plastic cutting boards seem convenient, especially because they're often dishwasher safe. But every time you chop, slice, dice, whatever you want to do on the cutting board with your knife and your food, they shed tiny microplastics and make their way into your body. Better options is to stick with natural materials. Things like a wood cutting board or a bamboo cutting board. These are great options. Some people are relatively opposed to the wood and bamboo cutting boards because, much like the wooden spoons, they think that that's going to harbor more bacteria. But if you clean them properly, that's typically not an option. And if you avoid cutting raw meats on them, that is a much safer option. Glass can be another great and easier to clean option than a wooden cutting board, but some will argue that it dulls your knife too easily. But in my opinion, I would rather sharpen my knife just a little bit more than to eat more plastic every day. Okay, moving on to bakeware. So much like our cookware, pots and pans, our bakeware can easily be lined with Teflon. Even some glass cookware can have a Teflon nonstick lining. So anytime something says non-stick, that's just a basic no for me. I don't want to risk contributing to that type of pollution or risk those similar non-stick chemicals from entering my food in any capacity. Plus, they sometimes can release fumes when overheated, and they can degrade over time. If there is a lining, sometimes they can scratch off, and then those are the particles that are most likely to enter your food. Some good options for baking ware are uncoated stainless steel or aluminum bake sheets, glass baking dishes, and ceramic bakeware, but you already know how I feel about ceramic things. You also might want to consider the disposable parchment papers or foils, because those typically will have some type of lining that make them non-stick. You can get like more natural wax ones, or untreated butcher paper works just as well for parchment paper, as well as a silicone liner, because that's more stable and low risk, and it is reusable. So before we wrap up, I want to say loud and clear, you don't have to overhaul your entire kitchen overnight. Just like with any zero waste or low waste minimalist journey, it does not need to be expensive, it does not need to be overwhelming, and it does not need to be wasteful. The most sustainable and realistic approach is simply to start replacing things gradually as they wear out. I'll be sure to drop some recommendations to the brands that I know and love and the materials to look for in the description box below, along with links if you would like to explore any of the resources that I mentioned throughout this video. Well, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, do the things you want to do. Let me know in the comments if there's things that you really loved, that you hated, or you want to know more about.